Hello and good evening. Welcome back to the Celluloid History Life as a Mystery channel. My name is Dan Rowlands. Yeah, very good to have you back on the UK's leading current affairs and politics channel. Cutting edge yet ad hoc and laid back. The channel that's in direct competition with the BBC News at 10, ITV News at 10, Channel 4 News, Channel 5 News, Sky News, Al Jazeera News, BBC Newsnight, BBC Newscast, BBC Question Time, Unspun World with John Simpson, UK Gold and Comedy Central. A very special welcome as always to fans of the Kildares, Rebecca Fishpond, Open Up and Emergency Exit. The channel that boldly goes where other politics and current affairs channels fear to tread. The channel that takes your brain to another dimension. So pay close attention. The channel that, like a 90s dance 12-inch, takes you higher. And the channel that's back by popular demand. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, there's my mic stand. Yes, very good Tuesday evening to everybody. Thanks for joining me again this evening. Must admit, me and my production team were trying to get, prepare the content for the show, and in true ad hoc and laid back spirit, I've got absolutely no idea what I'm going to talk about. Now, as you may have guessed, I've been watching Daily Politics, which has been on television this lunchtime, hosted by Vicky Young, and I'll read out what the guests. Today's guests were they had Henry Zeffman there, the BBC chief political correspondent. They had Baroness Chakrabarti from the Labour Party, who I believe's there's clues in the title, isn't it? She's from the House of Lords. They had Danny Kruger, formerly a Conservative MP, defected to Reform. There's a few that have done that, isn't there? And they had a fellow called Parth Patel, who was from the Institute for Public Policy Research and also was a doctor, I believe. They also had Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Conservative Party chairman. And it was quite. There was quite a lot of interesting stuff discussed today. There's a lot of speculation, even though the budget's actually quite a long way off. Rachel Reeves' budget, I think it's scheduled for the 26th of November. But there's lots of speculation about it, and there will continue to be right up until it actually occurs. I've noticed the people representing the government keep on trotting out the line. They're not prepared to discuss the budget. Just have to wait and see what's in it. However, all the indications are that taxes are going to be raised, and there is speculation that income tax may actually be raised for the first time in 50 years. I've made points on previous bulletins how tax mainstream media appears to have sort of sort of hijacked the subject of tax somewhat over the years, and in such a manner that it's kind of used by political parties of all persuasions as a sort of, there's a tendency to depict to the electorate that tax is always a bad thing, whereas in reality, decent centre and left wing and social democratic governments do utilise tax. It's just that they spend it wisely, basically. And I mean, to that end, the main government representative today was Baroness Chakrabarti, and she was saying how it's important that because Rachel Reeves made a bit of a speech. I think it was this morning, sort of pre-budget kind of little pre-budget speech, sort of with a bit of a heads up about what may or may not be in the budget. I think the idea is that she doesn't want it to be a complete shock to the system for so-called ordinary people if she raises taxes. Obviously the opponents of the government are going very much down the road of breaking the manifesto. How dare you? When I can't actually cite specific examples off the top of my head, but I think it's safe to say that successive Tory governments since the war have sort of often broken their manifesto. So a lot of major political parties are guilty of that particular crime, aren't they? Baroness Chakrabarti was basically saying that Reeves, needs to be honest with people, and there needs to be an honest conversation. There was the way she put it about public services, and there were one or two interesting things that came out of today's program. Actually, there was a guy on there called Parth Patel, as I say, who works for the Institute for Public Policy Research, and he's also a doctor. He had a lot of wise things to say about the current state of the UK, really. He had an interesting exchange at one point with the chairman of the Conservative Party, Kevin Hollinrake, regarding the difference between productivity in the public sector and productivity in the private sector, because Kevin Hollinrake from the Conservative Party was basically saying he was criticising Rachel Reeves in no uncertain terms for giving pay rises to NHS workers. I know she gave a pay rise to junior doctors who are now called residential doctors, aren't they? And I'm presuming that there were some other NHS workers. Did the nurses get one as well? Anyway, the point is, Rachel Reeves gave pay rises to NHS workers, and according to Kevin Hollinrake from the Tories, she didn't attach any productivity targets as a condition of pay rises, which, as far as Kevin Hollinrake is concerned, should be sort of standard practice when you give someone a pay rise after a negotiation. Now, Parth Patel, who's a doctor himself and works for the Institute of Public Policy Research, made the pertinent point, I thought, about how productivity targets don't work quite as well in the public sector as they do in many of the private sector workplaces. And by that, I took it to mean that he was what he meant was that in the NHS, there's a lot of work done on a sort of human. Is it too hippie-ish to say spiritual level? There's a lot of work done on a sort of communicative human level, isn't there? Which is kind of unmeasurable in empirical terms. It's sort of unmeasurable empirically. That's the way that's the idea I believe that he was getting at. It's difficult to actually produce figures for, say, someone's turns up in A&E suicidal, speaks to the resident mental health nurse that's on duty, in A&E, resident psychiatric nurse. The psychiatric nurse talks to the suicidal member of the public for an hour, and then they later on they're prescribed some, diazepam or whatever it is, and whatever they get prescribed. It's difficult to sort of quantify the chat between that member of public and the psychiatric nurse, in terms of they spoke, they did this, they made them 1 cup of tea, they asked them what colour underpants they were wearing once, and then they asked them what type of breakfast cereal they prefer once. And I mean, it's difficult to quantify that, isn't it? The point is that the person, the desperate member of the public is still alive, and the duty doctor prescribed them something to calm them down, and etc. And then they got a further follow-up appointment with the GP, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. By the way, I know I name dropped Diazepam there, but just as a layman's bit of advice, that's powerful stuff. It's quite addictive, that stuff, isn't it? They don't really like prescribing stuff like that if they can help it. Yeah. But anyway, that was an interesting it was useful, what Parth Patel said, because there are areas of working life which are difficult to attach targets and figures to, aren't they? So I guess in simple terms, I guess certain areas of working life, such as a lot of the work that goes on in the NHS and probably care homes and the health and social care work, it's probably more reliant on trust between trust and trustworthy leaders, bosses, trustworthy supervisors, as opposed to sort of tick boxes. And actually, interestingly, those sort of ideas are neither left nor right, are they? I mean, I certainly remember Tony Blair's New Labour used to get quite a lot of criticism for sort of over bureaucracy, too much bureaucracy from the Conservatives, So yeah, the idea of sort of just having trustworthy managers and a good bond between managers and workers is it's not really. It's like a cross-part. It used to be sort of a cross-party. It wasn't. I think back in the good old days, I sound like I'm showing my age, don't I? But it was, post-war. It was just seen as the wisest way to operate, wasn't it? I mean, they were talking today towards the end of the program about the guy from Reform, Danny Kruger. Actually, interestingly, he came across as quite a shrewd and what's the word? He came across as quite a sort of shrewd spokesman for the Reform Party. I was going to say, to be fair, I'm not particularly a big fan of the Reform Party's politics myself, but yeah, I mean, he came across like he was doing a good job he was politicking well, I lost my train of thought slightly then, because I got a bit of was I talking about efficiency in the workplace and stuff, wasn't I? Oh yes, I was just mentioning that towards the end of the BBC Daily Politics today, the term technocrats came up, the word technocrats, and it was, I think it was Danny Kruger from Reform that mentioned it, how he was plugging Reform, saying that the electorate is sick of the technocrats, sort of characteristic of the likes of Cameron's government, Blair's government, and sort of globalist technocrats he was critical of. And he was saying how he was plugging Reform as a sort of common sense, down to earth party for sort of ordinary Brits, who've had enough of technocrats, and because there was a lot of stuff spoken over the last there's been a lot of stuff spoken, I should say, over the last 5 to 10 years, hasn't there, about how Cameron's government and Blair and Brown's governments sort of lost touch with ordinary people, and became more concerned with I was going to say globalism, but it's not quite as that's quite a sweeping way of putting it, really. Became, the theory is that ordinary British voters have felt let down, isn't it? And that's why Brexit got voted for by 52% to 48% majority, and also that's why reform have become popular. The idea that this so-called going back to this thing about the media and political class, which I've been talking about quite a lot lately. The idea that there's a sort of political class that comprised the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, that was just sort of having a sort of incestuous sort of conversation that centred around Westminster, and the rest of Britain was sort of taken for granted, and there's a theory that explains the rise of reform, and I mean, as a I think I plugged the fact more than once in yesterday's bulletin, didn't I, that I'm a social democrat, and as far as social democracy goes, I believe that the centre left's job is to try and re-engage with the ordinary British people, which is why they have to. Which is why Starmer's, well, to my mind, he hasn't had much choice. To my mind, Starmer's quite correctly pinpointed reform as the sort of main opposition, certainly the ideas of reform, because they're so ahead in the polls. I mean, I was making the point yesterday that to my mind it's important to remember in terms of sort of, I was going to use the word propaganda in the media, but in terms of media opinion, it's very important, as far as I'm concerned, to respect the fact that reform have only got 5 or 6 MPs at the moment. So, and that being ahead in the polls is a very different animal to actually winning seats in the Houses of Commons. In the House of Commons, I keep saying that, House of Commons. But nevertheless, I can see why Starmer has kind of, he's realised that the reform. Someone used the phrase today on the Daily Politics show that reform have currently got the most sort of potent political imagination sort of in politics, and Starmer's obviously noticed that, and Badenoch's trying to revive the Tories, isn't she? But they're seen as a sort of dying party. Difficult to have too much sympathy for them, I must admit, as a social democrat. But there it is. But yeah, I was going to make the point that I was a bit wary of getting involved in anything too heavy this evening. I was going to try and give him a brain a rest. The channel that does not shirk any issue, I know we're past the halfway stage. Enjoy as I quite often say, enjoy your tea tonight. Enjoy your tea and enjoy your Tuesday evening. Anyway, I was just going to say, I believe that reform's popularity is very much connected with this idea of ordinary British people having been taken for granted. And reform, I think the word chime was used on the Daily Politics today. Whatever reform are doing, and however much people may disagree with it, it it's, according to the polls, it certainly seems to be chiming with a large section of the electorate. Now, I was going to make the point that it's the sort of, shall I go there? Yeah, I'll go there, because this is the channel that doesn't want to shirk issues. Because basically, we're told we're in this era of identity politics by Steve Baker from the Tories. It's the guy that I learned the phrase is the communitarian nationalists versus cosmopolitan globalists. We're told we're in an era of where that's the sort of the competition, the two sides that involved in modern politics, you know. And so obviously, I say obviously, that guy Steve Baker, I was on the Daily Politics show a few weeks back. He was making the point that, you know, identity politics is more important than what used to be. I think today on Daily Politics it was described as problem solving back in the days of Ian Duncan Smith and people like that. There was more of a cross-party consensus about sort of attitudes to the wider world, and it was UK politics was more concentrated on solving domestic problems, whereas now this sort of rise of identity politics has meant that you've got Reform, who are sort of Baroness Chakrabarti today described it as, in a critical way towards Kruger, sort of there's no point in sort of retreating into an English bunker, was the way she put it, as a way of describing what Reform are trying to promote, you know. But yeah, so getting back to the point, I mean, yeah, the issue of race can't be shirked, and Reform are viewed to have tapped into the psyche of white British working class voters, I believe, you know, who arguably are the sort of, that's the demographic that you need on side to win elections, the white British working class, you know. And for one reason or another, which I will no doubt go into on the channel, but I'm going to sort of, I don't want to go off on too much of a Ronnie Corbett tangent down any area, you know, and this evening. For one reason or another, what Reform are doing is chiming with that demographic, white British working class voters, and I believe that it's Labour's job to get white British working class voters back on side, because traditionally that I was going to say post-war, but it's actually pre-war as well, or between wars, and well, the Labour Party sort of, the roots of the Labour Party stretch back over 100 years, you know, pre First World War, arguably end of the 18th century, you know, but certainly more formally end of the 19th century. Certainly the roots of the Labour Party were sort of getting a grip in the you know, the roots were starting to produce shoots, and then the Labour Party as we know it emerged, you know, ultimately. And anyway, I was getting a trip down memory lane to my history degree that I did in the, well, I graduated in the mid-90s, you know, 1995. Yeah, so that was the point was, the white working class was in Britain was traditionally the core Labour voting demographic, you know, and Labour have lost that demographic. And they get accused now by. I'm just talking factually about this. I'm not. I'm very aware. I'm very aware that the issue of race is a very sensitive one at the moment in this febrile era of UK politics that we're in. But what Labour get accused of these days by less sophisticated supporters of reform, let's say, by less sophisticated white supporters of reform, let's spit it out, is, they're just trying to get the foreigners vote, they're trying to get, they don't care where they get the votes from as long as they get the votes, so they're sort of courting other cultures, like, the Islamic culture, and whoever, they're not bothered as long as they get voted for, there's a certain type of unsophisticated white reform supporter that's critiquing Labour thus, and I'm not, it's real eggshell territory, isn't it? Talking about race and culture these days in UK politics. But as I've said in previous bulletins earlier in the, recently, the only way these issues are going to be solved is by talking about, in the reality as one sees it, as far as I'm concerned, just the simple scientific facts of, different coloured skins and different typical features of races and different religions. That's a big hot potato of its own, isn't it? So that'll be, that's obviously, and that's another one. The sort of, I don't know. I think Farage does promote the sort of pro-Christian angle now and again. I've heard him do that. I think I remember at Easter he critiqued the rest of mainstream politics by saying, "I know you won't hear this from other political leaders, but I'm here to wish you a very happy Easter." And no, but I was just making the point that I don't know whether reform particularly go down the road of, we're a Christian, that particularly pro-Christian. But as I say, I certainly remember Farage was over Easter. I've lost my train of thought slightly there. I told you it was a complex eggshell issue, didn't I? But no, I think the train of thought was going down was the fact that reform, unsophisticated reform, white reform supporters accuse the likes of the Labour Party of, as I say, courting other cultures, other religions, other racial groups, etc., etc. And but I believe it would be very much a case of burying one's head in the sand to try and pretend that white working class Britons are not a core demographic that needs to be on side if you're going to win elections. It's just, I'm saying it as a scientific fact. I'm not saying it because I fancy myself as the new Oswald Mosley. Well, so I suppose you could say it's not particularly funny, is it? Fascism, or the new Nigel Farage. Is it defamatory to call Nigel Farage a fascist? The jury's out, isn't it? Some people are saying it's. It was said today on. I personally, maybe it's not wise to call him a fascist. Is it necessary? Personally, I think maybe it's not wise to use this bit of an emotive word, isn't it? But it was. Baroness Chakrabarti today was. She made the point that that she compared the policies that Reform are plugging to the similar policies that were plugged in the 30s and 40s in the UK by the likes of Oswald Mosley, and she said that we'd been here before and overcome those sorts of political ideas. There was quite a lot of sort of tangible friction between her and Danny Kruger in the studio, actually. But I'm aware I've just hit half an hour. As I say, time flies when you're having fun, but certainly there doesn't appear to be an awful lot of difference between what Reform are plugging and what the 1930s far right's an overused term, isn't it? But I suppose it's just language, isn't it? There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of we're stuck with the 26 letters that we've got, aren't we? But there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of difference between what Reform are plugging these days than what the Fascist Party in the UK was plugging in the 1930s. It's all about, it's like the scapegoat as Michael Heseltine. Is it right to call him an ex-Tory grandee? Anyway, Michael Heseltine, I think he's a bit of a sort of one nation Tory back in the Thatcher era. He certainly was calling out Reform and Nigel Farage and the gang and Farage's gang for being, well, I think he did use the word fascist, actually. He was saying that that back in the 30s the scapegoat was the Jewish population, and now the scapegoat is immigrants. So that's the way these far right ideas tend to work. It's like sort of scapegoating certain demographic of people, isn't it? And sort of blaming things on other people. Like as Stuart Lee, there's a famous Stuart Lee comedy skit, isn't there, where he's talking about immigration, coming over here, teaching us how to, enhancing our domestic cuisine, coming over here, making life more interesting, coming over, that's the scapegoat is people coming over here on small boats, isn't it? The scapegoat. But sorry, I've been a bit of a, well, I say sorry, no, I'm apologising really, but self-deprecation was a bad habit. Yes, I think I read that in a self-help book somewhere. Words are powerful. The great Oscar Wilde, was it the great Oscar Wilde? He said, to love oneself is the start of a lifelong relationship. And who was it who had that hit in the 80s called Respect Yourself? It wasn't Fine Young Cannibals, was it? Anyway, there was a hit in the 80s. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. Yeah. It'll come to me. Now then, listen. Jimmy Savile used to say that, didn't he? But don't let the bastards, as they say, not only don't let them grind you down, don't let the bastards monopolise phrases. Take the power out of them by. Just because heinous individuals like Savile said now then that they haven't monopolised the phrase. The English language is free for everybody to use, etc. In this febrile, feverish, up in the air, melting pot, 24-hour news media era that we're in. Anyway, it's time to start thinking about wrapping it up now, which I'm going to do. I wish everybody very, very well. I've got some news for all viewers. Due to dentistry requirements for key members of the production team, there probably won't be a bulletin tomorrow. But the channel will be back on Thursday. That'll take us to, won't it? So hope everyone has a great Wednesday. Halfway through the week tomorrow. You know, if you're fortunate enough to be a Monday to Friday worker, you're sort of halfway through, aren't you, tomorrow lunchtime? Although a lot of work these days, sort of, takes in the weekend, doesn't it? It's quite a lot of work. But yes. I hope everyone's enjoyed the bulletin. I've enjoyed making the bulletin. Quite a sort of bit of a waffly one in the best possible sense today, but I keep thinking there was another point I was going to make before I sign out, but I can't quite remember what it was. So it can't be that important, can it? Anyway, plenty more to talk about. The channel is young, Unfortunately, Mr. T and the African elephant still not getting on very well. But and as I say, Lord knows what the levels of Stockholm syndrome are for them now, because I mean, as I say, the quality of the food is really great. In Celluloid History Life is a Mystery channel here, hats off to the canteen staff, but still no ransom money, and sadly we're only in early November, aren't we? So there's still plenty of time to hear about the Coca-Cola Christmas advert, so fingers crossed. The Coca-Cola Christmas advert, I should imagine the John Lewis one would be quite remunerative to have in the middle of the bulletin as well, but fingers crossed. Sony's oh yeah, enjoy bonfire night tomorrow, so enjoy bonfire night. So yeah, maybe there could be some Christmas ad revenue still in the pipeline, couldn't there? But so I mean, they're still not getting on very well, like I say.
Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber.
They're all.
Quit your jibber jabber.
Where the staff.
Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber.
Straw.
Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your
You
jibber
said it
jabber.
was yesterday.
Quit your jibber jabber.
Hmm?
Quit your jibber
I
jabber.
think so.
Quit your jibber jabber.
So,
Quit your jibber jabber.
I think the thing is, it gets the friction between them gets worse. Obviously before feeding time. But listen, have a great evening. We'll be back on Thursday, and remember, always end your political points by slowing down
Quit your jibber
the
jabber.
pace
Quit your jibber jabber.
of the points that you're making,
Quit your jibber jabber.
so that
Quit your
they
jibber jabber.
are given
Quit your
more
jibber jabber.
emphasis.
Quit your jibber jabber.
Have a good night.
Jabber.
Good night, everyone.
Quit your jibber jabber. Quit your jibber jabber.